hui. And if I can please get Chair Baden Barber to open us with the karakia. Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou, tēnā koe te hemana, te tuene wai, o te rā, ko ngā mea. I konei, e mihi atu nei kia koutou me ngā kaimahi. Kia ora tātou nei kaupapa i tēnei rā. Hoi anō te atua kaharawa tēnei mātou mihi atu nei kia koe. I te timatatanga o tēnei huihuinga. Kia inoi atu nei kia koe, kia whakatōkia mai tō wairua ki mui a tātou. E rataki a mātou nei mahi. A mātou nei kōrero o tātou nei whakaaro. Kia kimi te anga whakamua, mo tō tātou nei rohinga o te matawa Māui. Nō reira, tiakina mai a mātou tēnei wā, nā ki tia mai a mātou o ti rā tō tātou nei rohinga o Ngāti Kahungunu Whānui. Nō reira, tēnei te mātou nei ino kia koe e māhau e whakamana i rungi tunga tapu o Hiu Karachi tō mātou kaiwhakaora. Āmene.
Āmene.
Kia ora. Kia ora tātou.
Warm welcome to our members, our mayors. Also, Tanya Kerr, kia ora, thank you for joining us in place of Mayor Sandra today.
Kia ora, anyway.
Obviously, to all our staff and our visitors here in today's chamber, tēnā koutou katoa. Just to get us started, a housekeeping. This meeting is being live streamed on the Facebook page and recorded for viewing at a later date on our YouTube channel. In the event of an earthquake, drop, cover and hold. If the shaking is long or strong, when shaking subsides, leave the building through the nearest exit, proceed immediately towards Napier Hill along Dalton Street to Tiffin Park, continue up the steps to Cameron Road. In the event of evacuation, if an emergency alarm sounds, immediately evacuate through the nearest exits and proceed to the assembly area just on the grass here at the corner of Dalton and Voltaire Streets. And the wharepaku are located down the hallway. Hi. Now, we have any apologies. We've got Mayor Sandra. Any conflicts of interest in today's items? No, around none. Thank you. Confirmation from the minutes on the 27th of January. Yes, happy to move. Thank you. Mayor Alex and Mayor Kirsten. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Fantastic. So we've got a lineup of National NEMA representatives joining us, and we've got Ian here, our Regional Relationship Manager, to come and talk to us about what's happening at a national level. Then we move into our transformation strategy and group update, control appointments, and then we move into public excluded. Ka pai?
Aye.
Fantastic. So I'll hand it over to you. Thanks, Shane.
Kia ora. As per the items there for the National Space Weather Response Plan, this is part of a wider program of work from NEMA around catastrophic plans. There is a few additional items in the amendments, but we do have online Louisa from the National Emergency Management Agency who's going to take us through that. So I might just hand straight over to Louisa.
Can't hear.
Is she turn it? She's got the two in, I think.
Kia ora, Louisa. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
Fantastic. We can hear you too.
Yeah.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Need to share it. No, he's on.
Can you hear us?
Share it.
Yes.
Yep.
Hang on, we can't get it online. Is that showing up on Facebook? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not showing that.
Sorry, Louisa, they're just this end just trying to make sure that it's been streamed appropriately.
No.
Yeah,
Can you share it again online, please?
if you stop it and start it,
Yeah, we can see a whiteboard.
Yeah, I know, we're trying to get rid of that. Okay, try again now, please.
Can you see that now?
Yes, thank
You
you.
can't share it, I don't think, at this stage. Yeah,
Yep, just carry on, thanks. We
Carry.
can start with this. Thank you.
you can do it. Okay.
Perfect. So just hand over to Ashley Beaumont, who will start us off.
Kia ora koutou. So my name is Ashley Froman. I'm the team lead of hazard risk management over here at NEMA, along with Louisa. And we just wanted to take the opportunity today to share some situational awareness of space weather and what we're doing about this risk at the national level, as Shane introduced earlier, and how that links into other work that might be going on around the emergency management sector. So space weather is generally recognised by the public as a series of auroras that we've seen across New Zealand over the past 12 months, unusually as far north as Auckland, as I'm sure you may be aware. It describes the various phenomena that occurs in space as a result of the variable conditions of the sun. And effectively what we're receiving here is very powerful bursts of energy. So like weather on Earth, space weather is always happening. And it usually does not affect us in the way we go about our lives, but occasionally there are some more extreme events that can cause impacts, which is what we're turning our mind to at the moment. And like aurora, there are different effects at different latitudes as well. So it's different all across the globe. The type of event that has the most potential to cause an emergency in our context is called a coronal mass ejection, and that generally manifests across a timescale of 12 hours to several days. And although the size of them can be tricky to determine at the moment, global monitoring does allow us a window of at least 12 hours to begin to prepare a response if this were to occur. So despite us calling it weather and storm, the effects of space weather are actually electromagnetic. And so while we do know that they won't harm people directly on the ground on Earth, it is likely to damage or disrupt critical infrastructure and technology. And that will have a global impact. So it's not only just technology that we're considering here in New Zealand, such as our radio, telecommunication, satellite comms, and our national grid. It also may affect things overseas that we come to rely on, such as banking systems, international travel, things like that. So as I mentioned, some of the critical infrastructure that may be affected is the national electricity grid, satellite, global navigation systems, which includes the timing systems that are often used for financial services, and communications infrastructure. And we're really conscious that that will have cascading impacts across all the interdependent infrastructure and services, such as transport, health, and the wider economy as well. So the reason this has really got a lot of renewed effort right now, as well as the catastrophic planning program, which Louisa will talk to in a moment, is that while Earth has always experienced space weather, our vulnerability to it reached a tipping point at about 2019, just because of the scale and connectedness of our society on these technologies that could be affected by space weather events. But also we're in what's called a solar maximum right now. So space weather is really impacted by the sun's solar cycle, which is on about an 11-year timescale. And we are in a period where these events do become more frequent, as we experienced back in May of last year, where we did have a small one. So that really sets the context for what we're trying to achieve through the program. Thank you, Louisa.
Yeah, thanks, Ash. As Ashley has just outlined, space weather can be quite impactful, but luckily for us, there are actions that we can take in that first 12 to 36 hours-ish to really minimise that damage that New Zealand might experience. But we have to get those actions really lined up and squared away in readiness, so that when that flag does go up, we can respond as efficiently as we can. So on the back of the May 2024 event that Ash alluded to, NEMA set up our space weather program in June, and that was really to drive forward the operational readiness arrangements that we had in place at NEMA and across their emergency management system, so that we are better prepared for the next event. We had 3 key aims initially, and that was to deliver the National Space Weather Response Plan, which was published in December, and I'll talk to in a few slides, and support concurrent system-wide activities like the DPMC National Risk Assessment that happened mid-last year, and also just really address any immediate gaps, such as standing up the Space Weather Science Advisory Panel, and really just improve the systems that we had at the time so that we could just bring space weather up to sit alongside some of our other hazards. So the National Space Weather Response Plan was publicly released in December 2024, and that can be found on our website. The plan coordinates the actions of agencies and key stakeholders during the initial responses to space weather events. We're a small team and quite limited time because of the solar maximum, so we had to really focus our efforts on where we thought we can make the most impact, and we found that to really be in that initial response phase where we can take those critical actions to reduce impact. And so the plan coordinates the actions of agencies during those initial response phases to facilitate the most efficient use of the available warning time. It sequences actions through operational phases, taking into account the specific space weather threats through time and against critical infrastructure disruptions, and it makes an array of assumptions, including the activation of the ODESC system, the National Crisis Management Centre, and the declaration of state of a national emergency. So you can start to see the real scale of response that we're expecting for space weather. And while the plan doesn't undertake regional or local planning, or sector-specific planning, we do think it provides useful guidance to do so, and we have already seen the plan be picked up by other agencies and looking at how they can align against it, such as for the aviation sector. So thinking about what this means really at the regional or local level, while we've had to really get our house in order to make sure that we're well prepared for the decision making, we actually think that maybe the best use of time at the regional level is to undertake that hazard agnostic business continuity plan, but just with the mindset that this might need to last for some time. So looking at whether business continuity plans are fit for purpose and can last for, a week or so. We think that will be really useful, and we're really happy to support any work underway, so happy to take any further questions on that, but I think we'll leave it there for now.
Fantastic. Thank you both for coming to present to us and bringing this to our attention. I'll just open up for any questions to these ladies. Yeah, kia ora, Leon.
Kia ora, Leon Symes, Chair Tātou. Just, have there any assessment done in terms of the impact or reliability that we have on our satellite system regarding some of these solar flares? Obviously, critical impacts is satellite systems, aviations. What critical infrastructure rely on satellites and the likes to run from a national perspective? Because if we get an understanding of what critically relies on satellites, then obviously then we can plan. At the moment, anything, telecommunications is one potentially. If you're on Starlink, you'll lose Starlink. What critical infrastructure nationally relies heavily on satellite communications?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So a lot of the impacts from satellite outages are from the position, navigation and timing implications. So we know that, you need really precise timing for some of the telecommunications networks or the banking sector. And so there's a real cascade in the show, the slideshow that Ashley showed around where those secondary, tertiary impacts do fall out. Is probably an area where we need to really look a bit deeper, but at the moment we know that there is that real cascade beyond the electricity network. Do you have anything?
Yeah, so one of the main areas I think that immediately came out from the National Risk Assessment is transport. So a lot of the aviation information and navigation systems are highly reliant on GNSS, and we also see that even now when there is some moderate level disruption from smaller space weather events, we do see some aviation disruption overseas already because of that. Similarly with port control systems, port operations, emergency location beacons, anything we can think of that might use a location. But Louise is right, and then more work is going underway through the National Risk Assessment process to really understand the implications of the positioning. But also timing, which is where things like payments come into it. One event that came out that was a bit of surprise globally was from the May event, was a lot of some agricultural systems use tractors, for example, that may use GPS to automatically go across a field, and those were all highly disrupted and caused some on-flowing impacts for those farms. So they kind of pop out in surprising places, and more work to do.
Okay, cool. Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye. Thank you, Tanyaku.
Ko Tania Kerr Takuingoa, Hastings District Council. We've been building rural hubs in the affected areas post-cyclone, and their methodology of communication is a radio, the RT radio, and a digital version of. Given the effect of severe weather, solar weather, could be hours or days without communications, do they still work? Does the old-fashioned radio network still work?
Good news there, I think. We have received information from the Telecommunications Forum to suggest that AM radio will be fine. Some of the what's it called? Yeah, it might be slightly degraded, but it will be fine. And we think cellular will also be okay. So it might just be the internet that goes down. But yeah, the old-fashioned radio should still work, and we're really relying on that for our messaging going forward.
Thank you. And I'm also just really looking at this simply from a household point of view, what a household needs to know. And one of the things I pick up in our report is that normal preparation for any emergency is effective enough for a solar weather event. I see you're not.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, we agree. Especially if it's, more than 3 days worth of supply. But just at the household level, that's all the same as the other hazards, which is really useful here.
Thank you. Great questions. I think we'll move on. So, yeah, thank you very much to you both. And Ian.
So, Louisa, can you share this with the group and send it to Shane, the presentation?
I sure can do that. And I also have John Price in the room with me if he's lined up next to do the next presentation.
Fantastic. Okay, Shane.
Kia ora, thanks team, and yes, John Price, who's online, who's the Director of the National Emergency Management Agency, or NEMA, is going to do the next update for us. This is kind of a two-part update, but the focus being on what's known affectionately as EMSIP, the Emergency Management Significant Improvement Program, which is effectively NEMA's response, I guess, to the government inquiry and the massive work that needs to be done to uplift the entire system. But also in there, you'll also see in the sort of printed update a little bit about the Catastrophic Event Handbook and Starlink, which Louisa just spoke to. So what I'll do is I'll hand over to John Price, or JP, to take us through a little bit around the EMSIP and the work that they're doing to enhance the government's response to emergencies. But I think it's also clear to note that it's heavily aligned to our transformation strategy, which is going to come up shortly, so you'll be able to see the parallels. And apologies, some of us on the phones, we also just had a National Warning System test message, so we're having to deal with that as well. But kia ora, John.
Kia ora, John. Welcome to the committee.
Kia ora. Look, thank you very much, and thanks, Shane, and thank you, Chair, for the kind invitation to speak to you today. And yes, that was our national warning system, just testing that, which is a little bit of what I'll cover off shortly. Just like with my two colleagues, Ashley and Louisa, just reinforcing this is not something new, this space weather. It was first documented, known as Carrington. Richard Carrington was the person that identified the solar flare situations that were happening with the sun back in 1869. And the story behind that was, at the time, it affected, we didn't have a lot of telecommunications, those sort of things we now have, and the technology we have now, but it did burn out the telegraphic system that they did have operating at the time. So the space weather would normally be nice auroras, nice colours in the sky that we saw in May. But because we're so now reliant on technology, it's put us at a risky space with this. So think electricity, think telecommunications, think GPS, but also think health. So many of our people that live at home with health-related issues where they're dependent upon electrical capability to generate and keep them safe at home becomes an issue. So we're working very closely with Whataora and the Ministry of Health to make sure that those people that are reliant on machines, dialysis machines, those type of things to keep them alive would not be affected here. So also just to give you some reassurance as well, this is different. Like if we have a Hikurangi or if we have a alpine fault, New Zealand's affected, but with space weather, the whole world will be affected. So it's a slightly different situation we would find ourselves in. If it was a Hikurangi, you would normally be confident to have the support of other countries that would surge in to help us out in New Zealand. The reality is they'll be busy dealing with this themselves. So we're going to be on our own for a period of time, hence why the rigour of the planning is so important. And we are working very closely with the USA, which is a place NOAA, which with the Canadians, with the British, their Met Service, and with Australia, which is their BOM, which is their Bureau of Meteorology. So working really closely with those agencies as well. So we're pretty well joined up. So when events occur, we are linking into them and understanding what's going on in those countries as well. If you look at USA, it was just actually an executive order has just been signed off by the president. They're naming their 4 biggest hazards, and space weather is the 4th biggest hazard that they see for them as a country as well. So very interesting times with this. So we're very proud of the work the team have done in getting us from May to now with a really good, robust plan that would give you confidence. Also, you know, our Minister Mitchell, and the Prime Minister have a very much a vested interest in this. Continuing on with what Shane has asked us to talk about is the strengthening the emergency management in New Zealand. Well, you know, a lot of things that, and you've been at the very heart of it with your community, is it's a time now for us to take a look, pause, and ask ourselves, what do we need to do better? And there are 2 big components that are occurring at the moment that are enabling us to sort of position ourselves well with that. I can position the slide there, Louise. Thank you. There we go. Lovely. Thank you very much. Yeah. So think 2 things. Think a change program, which is the Emergency Management System Improvement Program. So that's MSIP, but we love to abbreviate things, so we abbreviate it down to MSIP. This is the taking of the government report that was done into the North Island severe weather events and Cyclone Gabrielle, and being able to take what was the recommendations and the actions. And if you recall, there were 15 of those that were sort of put together. The 15th one of them was to come up with a roadmap, and that's what we've been working a lot on the last few months, is to come up with a roadmap on behalf of our minister that identifies the opportunities to get an uplift in the system and to ensure that all those lessons learned, going all the way back to the TAG review of 2018 and probably even earlier with the Technical Advisory Group report and all the other subsequent reports that have been done, and try to encapsulate that all into a roadmap. And so what we've basically done is taken those 15 actions and recommendations and then consolidated them into 4 focus areas. So that's the change program. Then with any good change program, it's also an awareness that the legislation that we currently are using, which was 2002, it's not fit for purpose anymore, and the bill or the legislative abilities need to be revisited. As you probably recall, that did happen after with the previous government. That piece of work was stopped. This government's asked, is that transformational enough? And this is why it's been recommenced, to make sure that we're taking the learnings from the lessons learned that have occurred and make sure the bill enables us to be better position. So recognising that we probably weren't fit for purpose and we need to find a way to go through that. So you would know this very well, the emergency management system. So what we've done with this, we've gone, right, the improvement program has got some phases. The first phase was the report itself, which brought out Yeah. So the notes that came through from that is a wider scope that and informed by the NESWE inquiry and other events and reviews and inquiries. So what we did as an organisation was also go back and look at all the reviews of the reviews, if you like, to make sure they're all in place there. The Minister got that report back, and now we're looking at a detailed investment and implementation roadmap. So nothing comes for free. So a lot of these recommendations will have a tag against them or an amount of money, and that will all be consolidated to the roadmap, go to the Minister. It's nearing completion with our Minister, and then he will front up to Cabinet for that to be signed off or agreed on. What are the key things that we need to be focusing on going forward? So as I said, 15 actions, recommendations consolidated down into five focus areas, we've called them. So there's the whole of government, society approach, recognising that there are 5.2 million people involved in emergency management across the country. What is the role of society? There was a lot of information came back that there's a mixed message of who's doing what. So we know the very first responders are actually the public themselves, and they need to be very well aware of that and know that there is roles and responsibilities, and that, you know, that's that whole element of how do we become ready, how do we get over the complacency side of things, and how do we better educate. I think of some really effective education programs that have been run, for example, through road safety and road policing. If you recall, with seatbelt wearing that saved lives, it was the campaign of Make It Click. You know, those sort of things is we've got to be able to leverage off a lot more than what we're currently doing at the moment. Number two, support and enable local government. Nothing is changing from the model that currently sits there. You know, we've got our communities, we are locally led, we are regionally coordinated and nationally supported. That model is still the right model for New Zealand. You know, it cannot be done from just everything being done from a central point of view. Our communities know themselves, and therefore we need to embrace that going forward. Building capability and capacity, a lot of that is getting the tools right for us to be able to do that. Everything from ensuring that the National Crisis Management Centre, and if anyone's been down to Wellington and looked at that, known as the bunker, which is it is the basement of the beehive. The realisation is to run a national coordinated capability from the bunker. It's not fit for purpose. So money has been approved, obviously, for the building of a National Crisis Management Centre. It's underway at the moment. We also got to make sure we've got an alternative National Crisis Management System Centre, because we know that the Hikurangi or the Alpine Fault or other events could take Wellington out. If that is the case, how do we operate when Wellington cannot operate? What is the business continuity plan for Wellington in the future? And so a lot of work's going on at the moment around an alternative National Crisis Management Centre, and that's been looked at in Auckland. And also, how do we manage and grow and operate government out of there as well? Enabling the system, and then what's the model going to be for focusing on that delivery? So phase two, the roadmap. We know that there are financially restrained at the moment. That's all over the media and everything. So one thing we need to be able to do is say, where will the investments occur early? Where will the investments occur medium and long term? So we're looking at a 5 to 10 year sort of plan out. It's at the moment the roadmap is very high level, so it has the context of what we want to try to achieve without the very detail that will come later on. Once the cabinet paper or the roadmap goes to government look at it, they go indicate we would like one of these, and one of these, then the detailed business plans would be then developed to support that, including the funding to enable that to occur. So NEMA is currently developing those recommendations, and we're looking for an in-principle decision from government into the possible road path for us to take going forward. So these are the focus areas in a little bit more detail. So the focus area 1 we talked about earlier. So what we want to be able to do is provide a significant uplift in investment. So public readiness programs. Resilience Fund is something that's currently has been set at, it's just on about 900,000 per year. That amount has been the same for the last 40 years. And that resilience fund is an area that we are suggesting could be something that could be boosted. We believe if you'd kept inflation in check with that money, you'd be looking at something more in around sort of the $30 million range, which would be money that would be used to provide that uplift across the country for outreach programs, for giving that uplift that you need in the emergency management place. Also got, we need to be more evidence-based in our investments, so having additional mechanism information to support communities, making sure there's good science in behind a lot of this, and recognising very strongly the critical, important part that iwi Māori and communities play in emergency management. You know, how often, and you saw that very much yourselves, that when the situation was occurring for a lot of communities, it was iwi Māori that stepped in, mobilised, got underway, and we need to be recognising that and also helping to work with iwi Māori to position ourselves better across the system. You've also got other communities that need a lot of support as well. You know, if you think about our church-based communities, Pacifica communities, our ethnic communities, our children, what do we do with schools? You know, one of the biggest uplifts you see overseas is embedding emergency management into the curriculum across schools so that children learn that they can, and what the risk is for them, what the hazards are for them, and what they can do to keep themselves and their families safe. Focus area 2 is continuing to roll those national and regional plans. You know, we know what our hazards are. The science tells us what the implications of the Hikurangi, the alpine fault, the volcano activity, the likelihood of more severe weather, the global warming situation. We know what the science is telling us, but we need to make sure we've got that in and recognised in good plans that operate both at a local level, a regional level, and at a national level. Hence why the catastrophic plan being put together by NEMA, because we recognise we need to have a plan that is fit for purpose for our worst day when something occurs for us. So, and that means also having those arrangements in place internationally. One of the biggest issues we have as a country is we logistically, or supply chains, we operate in a just-in-time culture that's happened from various decisions made many years ago, and we need to be thinking about, well, what does it look like for a just-in-case? We've seen how the supply chains got stretched during COVID and how the pressure goes on when we don't have that stockpile capability in place. National standard settings and assurance, again, putting assurance into place, which is making sure we've got our own audits in place, our own ability to know that certain things need to be done. Have they been done? What do we need to do for those gaps? Enhanced technology. We don't have a good common operating picture across the country. It's very hard to be able to make good decisions about putting the right people in the right place at the right time, doing the right things, if you don't have good awareness. So that situational awareness comes from having a good common operating picture. And what I mean by a good common operating picture, there's some components that we need to get a lot better at. One is obviously having data, good tools, good people to make sense of that data. That's your analytical and your intelligence capability. And we need to continue to invest in our early warning systems. So our DART buoys, our emergency mobile alerting systems, our notification systems, they need to be up to scratch, need to be meeting the needs of modern technology, because they are the things that are going to keep our communities safe when something goes bang in the middle of the night. So a lot of work to be done in that space. So, and significantly uplift in the regional support areas. So there's a concept of what we call regional support teams. You may have heard of EMAT teams. EMAT teams are emergency management assistant teams that are temporary teams that are pulled together they work in other agencies across the government. They get pulled together at the time of an emergency. What we're looking to do is set up regional support teams in the likes of Christchurch, Wellington and Auckland, whose job will be basically to uplift the system through training, exercise, drilling, and making sure that the functions that are required to have really good capability are in place.
John, could I just ask we do a quick whip through of the rest of it, just so we have enough time for question and answers afterwards, because I can see a lot of people wanting to ask questions already. So if we do a quick brief of the rest of the slides, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Yep, certainly. Sorry, very passionate about this, so probably talking too much. So thank you. Yeah, so the other two key focus areas are focus area 3, which is just simply defining the future system workforce. What that is about is professionalism. So emergency management, we don't like the term Dad's Army, because that does not represent the professional organisations that we all belong to. So to professionalise the profession of emergency management means putting in place some legislative support, some potential funding to enable that to occur, to come up with pathways. How do you certify people? How do you ensure they've got the knowledge, skills and ability, and they're standardised? You should be able to move around the whole country, be able to support without actually having to relearn the job and the task in hands. Exercise area 4, expand on our exercise program. So that's making sure we exercise drill. It's all about muscle memory, getting those sort of things right. So, and also enhance our national recovery function and the model that currently operates. We know that quite often recovery is seen as something that happens afterwards. It should be seen as something that happens at the time of response, and making sure we've got the right systems and processes in place for recovery to actually work there. I touched on the facilities and equipment earlier, and options for alternative management funding model as well. The other part of it is the legislative part, which is the bill. And the bill's objectives they're outlined there, so you can read those through, but make sure we strengthen the participation of our communities. They are absolutely critical at the core of emergency management, and also to provide that clear responsibilities of, who's responsible at national, regional and local levels, enabling a higher minimum standard of emergency management and minimise disruption of essential services. That's that whole thing around infrastructure. If you get our Maslow's hierarchy of needs right, we can get our communities back on their feet, get the economy back on its feet earlier, but that means we've got to have those services available, and ensuring that agencies have the tools to do their job. So some of the key areas of interest that the bill's focusing on, what is the local government roles and responsibilities? What's the roles and responsibilities of central government? How do the community participate in emergency management? What's our planning, the framework to move forward, and emergency powers? Making sure that the legislative gaps that currently are in place are tightened, and making sure, financial compensation liabilities associated with the emergency powers are consistent. We cannot have our communities struggling to access finances when they've been through an event. It's hard enough to navigate bureaucracy for us as public servants. It's got to be easy for our communities. So, Chair, that's me. I'll take questions now if you like.
So, thank you, John. Really appreciate that, and I see almost exact similarities to our transformation plan. But yours came in a bit after ours, didn't they?
It's great to see the alignment,
Yeah,
Chair.
that alignment, that's perfect. And look, we'll hear from Matt in our next item, so he could probably give us a bit of intel around how there are similarities and if there are any differences in terms of the MSIP. Just a question from me to start. You talk about the Uplift Resilience Fund, which would be fantastic. We all know here that would make a real difference to our community resilience, which is the core of everything we're doing here as well. Can you give us some markers on what that will actually look like? You talked about inflation, and if we're in line with that today, is that exactly what you're heading towards? Is a figure of 30 million?
Yeah, that would be the ideal, and increase that as inflation occurs.
Yeah.
I think one of the thing we'd have to be realistic with is that this is a 10-year program of work, 5 to 10-year program of work. So you'd probably find it will get a significant uplift in the first year, and then build upon that and build upon that. You're also going to find, if we get the green light from government for this, the next thing is, what is the criteria? How do you make sure it's fair, transparent, and equitable? I think one of the things is making sure, we still have very much a postcode emergency management system. So making sure we know that our vulnerable communities, there are certain places in the country that are a lot more vulnerable to natural hazards and disasters than other parts of the country. So making sure we've got some really good science behind that, and who are those communities. It wouldn't take much. You sit, unfortunately, in an area that's more likely than other parts of the country to again have severe weather events. West coast of the South Islands, another one as well. So if you know that, what do we need to do to make sure we're a bit more targeted in the uplift capability? So, but all that detail needs to be fleshed out and worked out, and that's, if we get the thumbs up and the green light from government, then we'd be working with the likes of yourselves as the joint committees and the KEGS to make sure we get the criteria right.
Fantastic. Yeah, we definitely will take that invitation to be working closely together. Thank you. Mayor
Lovely.
Alex.
Thank you, John. Alex Walker, I'm the Mayor of Central Hawke's Bay. Thanks for your presentation. I've got two questions. The first one is, you had on your slide about you're making recommendations to Cabinet on investment. Interested in kind of that direction of travel on that, because what we need to see is support from the centre for investing in ECCs and buildings, in monitoring and warning systems, and in common operating platforms, as well as supporting skills and capabilities, particularly at the group controller kind of level, where we're struggling to be able to fill those areas. So where are you going to be recommending the centre invest? Because there's a lot of work here that is going to be led and funded probably by locally, is my sense. So how are you going to ask the centre to support us?
Exactly what you've said there across all those components. They're all critical components. You need to have a fit for purpose ECC, EOC. So one of those things is sort of being able to identify what does good look like, and the same with training and development and exercising, making sure that's happening across the way as well. One of the recommendations that came out of from the report was that the chief executives of each of the councils potentially by default would become the local or group controller. That would mean that having substantive training and uplift to be done there as well. One of the reasons for that is because normally the chief executives have the relationships and the ability to manoeuvre resources around here. So look, all that investment and uplift, again, isn't going to be done. We work very closely with the likes of Shane and his counterparts from across all of the country in the Matu. We would also be working very closely with you as the Joint Committee and the KEGS as well, as we've been doing with the MSIP program to date, is making sure that the voice is being heard. Because we know the uplift's not going to happen in Wellington. There will be some uplift happen in Wellington, sure, because we've got to have the ability to be nationally capable and nationally trained and developed. But we also recognise we're a system and we're not just an agency. So it's right across the whole system. You know, how do we up? You've got a very strong strategic plan that Matt and Shane will be talking to afterwards about how do you train the hundreds of people that you need to potentially in the Hawke's Bay to manage a situation in the future. We would see us being part of that as well.
Thanks, John. I just want to pick up on the comment you made about training council chief executives to be group controllers. I think that's a terrible idea. I'll just be really honest, a terrible idea, because actually business continuity of us being able to provide lifelines in our communities during the time of an emergency is vital. And certainly the view we've taken here is that group control comes alongside that rather than as a substitute for. And so I'm interested in why you think that's a direction.
Oh, it's not my direction. It's the direction from the minister in the paper that the government report. So again, that's in the government report there. I think what it's trying to do is put the focus rather, because if a chief executive may be by default become the group controller, but can advocate down to, but the responsibility and the accountability for the community would sit with them, as it does with you as a joint committee. So that they may or may not decide to do it. Some of them already are local controllers or group controllers, but it's setting the benchmark high so that it can be advocated down if required.
John, I think we'd like to provide some feedback to that. How do we do that and by when?
Oh, look, yeah, that'll be the submission process that would go through, and Ian can outline that. There'll be a large public submission, and you can, by all means, that's the process that needs to be worked through. Like for the MSIP program, we had the KEG chairs and the joint committee chairs attend the forums here, and the same with the EMLG, or the Emergency Management Leadership Group, as well. So yeah, those submissions would go through the normal submission process once the minister's signed off on his intent with the bill.
Okay, if you're in the room, you probably read the room, and probably the strength of Alex's feedback you can take back to anyone in Wellington. Thank you. I'll hand it over to Baden. Thank you.
Kia ora, John. Baden Barber, Ngāti Kahungunu Chair. I'm just really interested around the improving participation of Māori in the overall system. For me, it's hardwiring us into the legislation. Ka tahi ka rua, kind of soft wiring us into everything else that's going on in terms of building our capability, training our people, and the list goes on. And I'll put this in front of Minister Mitchell directly. So yeah, I mean, we are manuhiri to this committee, Leon and myself, but we should be here with a voting right, and that's why we want to see change in the legislation. Otherwise, ka noho tonu mātou hei taina.
Yeah, kia ora, Baden. Yeah, your voice was very strongly heard at the iwi chairs, so thank you for your voice, which was good to hear. Look, exactly, this is why it's a really good chance to look at what we currently use with our legislation and to firm up on that. At the moment, when it comes to, KEGS and Joint Committee, it doesn't, at the moment you can have opt-in people in there. It needs to be stronger, and that's something that you could make that submission through the submission process. Absolutely. Because you need to, but also it's the other thing is like I often think like setting kegs, there's nothing worse when we start to devolve representation down and down and down. These are important forums where important decisions are made around the life and death of, you know, our communities and ensuring that our communities have that resilience. When we devolve down to partner agencies at lower levels, we actually don't have at the table the decision makers with the mandate to make those decisions. So I would, you know, personally strengthen any way we can to make sure we've got the right people at the table with the right mandate to make the right calls.
So you're saying that regions should decide for themselves how they represent themselves? Or is this a central government initiative to push mandatory across all nation? I think we've got a regional approach here, and if the region wants to decide to go a certain way, it should be given the flexibility to do so and not have government constraint.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's what you need to be able to do to determine what is, you know, customed for your region is a different region than other regions around the country. So you need to work out, you know, what that would look like. What does the membership of your group look like? But what I'm saying is, you have to have the right members there that have the ability to actually make the right informed decisions at your levels. What that may look like will be up to you to determine. But again, that's the whole essence of going through the submission process to make sure the fit is right.
Thank you. And last question from me, Alex.
Just a quick one on the other agencies in the system, because you've talked a lot about local government, about emergency management. You haven't talked about the other agencies who have a statutory obligation to be part of this. So are you giving directions and strengthening legislation for 111 police, FENS and ambulance alongside this?
Absolutely. At the moment, ambulance don't have to be there because they're an NGO. Well, you know, sure, that's how some of their funding is, but they're actually an emergency service. So my thing is, yes, they should be there. And that's one of the recommendations that the current bill is looking at to make sure we have currently sitting there, you know, your ambulance service there. And by all means, yeah, police and fire, they are first responders. They are critical to this, plus also the health, you know, Ministry of Health need to be there as well. And who else you determine should be there. At the moment, you can opt in and out, obviously. The other thing too is, you know, we talk about suitably experienced and qualified for group controllers, but currently local controllers don't have to be suitably qualified or experienced under the current Act. Well, that's a nonsense. They should be, because again, we're asking these people to make sort of pretty important decisions for their communities. So, you know, I would have an expectation they'd be suitably qualified and experienced. We have that for recovery managers, both at group and local levels. So it's really just making sure we have the right people at the table who can make the right decisions for the community, because, you know, you are all elected representatives, you know, who have, you know, put up your hand to serve your communities. So we want to make sure that we can use the legislation and the MSIP improvement program to actually enable you to be the best that you can be and get the uplift in the system, because our communities deserve it.
Thank you, John. We really appreciate your time and getting a sense we're moving in the right direction together, but we will be submitting on the bill as we should, and keep a close working relationship between NEMA and our care group here.
Thank you very much. And look, this is we talk about once in a lifetime opportunity. Please see it as that. This is a chance for you who have a strong voice across Aotearoa, New Zealand, to actually put your voice. And, you know, you've been through something that most people haven't been through as a community. And from that terrible tragedy, you now will hopefully have an opportunity to make a difference for the community. And you've got a lot to offer as elected representatives of your communities, because you've had to face it. So just wanted to thank you also for the mahi that you are doing and the work that you're doing for your communities. You are the face and the voice of your communities, and nationally absolutely need to listen to the words and the reflections and the experience that you've all been through. So thank you for what you do every day.
Kia ora. Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Ka kite.
Ka kite. Okay, actually, we need to move the recommendations from both the National Space Weather Response Plan and the NEMA update. Can I have a mover? Mayor Alex and Councillor Kerr, all those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Kia ora. Thank you. Kia ora, Matt. We're on to Transformation Strategy Implementation Update. And now this will be the first time that you present to us the dashboard. Fantastic.
Correct. It will
Thank you.
change slightly. I had aspirations of giving you a designed dashboard that you'll see for the next 3 years. Instead, you've got my arts and craft in front of you. There'll be a design one literally next week, which I will update monthly. But yes, this is the first time you've seen the dashboard.
Fantastic. Does everyone have a copy of that? Yep. Right, awesome. Thank you. Maybe just some key highlights,
Right, thank you.
and then we'll take questions.
Okay,
Couple?
kia ora tātou. I'll take the transformation update report as read, and you have the dashboard as an attachment. From the update itself, the key thing I'd like to bring your attention to is the forcing function that I'm placing upon you as a joint committee of 1 July, where we move from the current model of a centralised group office supporting the region widely to a decentralised, I'm calling a balanced model, where there is both a group office providing regional support and a local team providing local support. Now, that is sort of happening at the moment, but there's an emphasis change. That 1 July date is key. In the report, I detail the triggers for that. It's a notional date. It's aligned with the start of the financial year, which is when your staff will be are recruited, and broadly speaking, a lot of the operational, albeit small, funding will come from each of your local territorial authorities. It may shift, but I'd like us to, in fact, JP's boss, Dave Gawn, who was a boss of mine, pointed out that it's not a plan if you don't have timing. And so I've given us a timing to sit to. There are 3 areas where we need to meet in order for us to go from that, because there has a responsibility shift. In essence, at the, if an event was to occur, a trigger warning was to occur from 1 July, whilst the regional flood team, looked after by Nick and supported through Shane and his group, would of course provide that trigger. Locally, the Mayor, the Chief Executive, your Emergency Management Office, and Mana Whenua representative and the Controller would convene a meeting to make decisions about whether to stand up an INT, whether to then take it to the next level and declare an emergency and so on. Now, at the moment, that sort of still happens, but we're changing the model, and you've been through this process. So on 1 July, by 1 July, we need to be happy that we have in place service level agreements and roles and responsibilities approved by the June Joint Committee. We need to be comfortable that we've gone through the recruitment process for local TA emergency management advisors. I'm comfortable that they'll be recruited. They may or may not be there, right? There'll be a slight difference between when the recruitment process occurs and when they may or may not turn up. Noting that at least 2 of those positions are probably already in place, subject to consultation. And a declaration from, at the moment, Shane is your acting group manager, / group controller, that we are ready to transition. If all those 3 line up at your June meeting, this next meeting, then on 1 July, we'll transition to that new model. If none of those 3 line up, you get to make a decision regardless. Those are simply triggers for you to consider. You might choose to delay it, or you might choose to go and work your way through it. That's the first key point out of this document. As it relates to the dashboard, I'll take you through it in a minute. As it relates to the transition activities, I have completed about 3/4 of the service level agreement activity. I'll once I've got a draft that someone can read without throwing rocks at me, I will give it to Nick and Doug and Shane, and we'll workshop it briefly on your behalf, and then we'll consult widely at that point. Noting I am consulting widely, last week I met with Hastings District Council and received some pretty good operational feedback about their aspirations, and that's occurred across Hawke's Bay. The period as well, in that July period, if I can just also give you some assurance, I'm trying my hardest to keep draft and interim and all these words out of my mouth, but the reality is from 1 July to December, there's going to be a test and adjust period. We're going to exercise 11 times in that window. And so in that window, there'll be 11 times we will go, oh, that didn't work, and that will happen. There'll be times we go, no, that was awesome. And in December, at that joint committee meeting, we'll bring a report to you that will go, right, that worked, that didn't work, we've got to rewrite that and so on. And from about January next year, 2026, we'll have a service level agreement that you'll live with. And you'll live with until the long-term plan of 2028. Because I think at that point we'll be having a discussion around rating and funding, and that's part of the formal consultation process. And I think there'll be some tweaking at that point. Dashboard itself, in front of you, Māori Partnership dashboard. I've drafted a amendment to the terms of reference for the joint committee. I put in my aspirational desire to see Mana Whenua have 2 members formally recognised with voting rights, or voting rights on most topics and maybe not in others, and I've sought legal opinion on the implications of that. I've also put in my aspiration to have the group controller, group manager and KEG chair included as formal observers on the meeting, or a word that's appropriate. And HBRC Legal will look at that and provide me some answer sometime in mid-April, and we'll go through that process to see where we get to.
And Matt, that's based on the current legislation as it sits?
I hold the opinion, having read the legislation, but I'm a layman and I need a legal opinion, that the legislation says who must be on the joint committee. It doesn't say who can't be on the joint committee. And I'm also of the opinion that even so, what would happen if we were to include members of the joint committee that fit us, and we heard that, our community needs? What would actually happen? And then thirdly, even if that happened, would we care? That's my layman's opinion. We need a legal opinion. Now, Shane and I have had great, robust discussions on this, and Shane's got a stronger technical view on it, and that's great. I guess that's the gift I have, is that I'm just relaying what you've told me. Shane has a technical view, and he's spot on with that technical view, and we need a legal opinion. And then, I think even then, I think it comes to this meeting, and I guess my gut feeling is you get to make it. Cool. The KEG is easier. I will write on your behalf, or for Doug, or something of that nature, a letter requesting that Mana Whenua identify 2 representatives for KEG. Locally, I think you should be prepared that when you receive on 1 July your local emergency management responsibility to change the operating model, that as mayors and chief executives you should be prepared to hold a regular quarterly meeting with your emergency management team, to whether you do that formally or informally. I was a GM director in Hutt City, and Joe Miller there held an informal meeting quarterly. Campbell Barry, I think, gets the controller to brief formally at an agenda item. That's a sort of blended model. It's your call. But my recommendation would be that you schedule a quarterly or something similar, and I'll write this down in the plan for you, that has the CE, the mayor, the controller, the emergency management lead, probably the portfolio lead, because they usually have that, and a Mana Whenua representative at the local level. And you discuss either semi-formally or formally, but I think that's a gift that you have. I don't want to direct you. I'm going to provide you a framework and suggest that you roll as you see fit. Hui with Mana Whenua is occurring. I've had 5 hui to date with various people that the regional council team have put me in front of. I've done my best. You can tell I like talking. I've done my best to listen and not talk. I've heard everything from emergency management in the Hawke's Bay is awesome, and they just need to keep on doing what they're doing, all the way through to we want a separate system and stuff in between. Great. I'm going to capture that the best I can. I've listed the three things that I think are appearing as themes at the moment. Training for Māori across the region. Sorry, I can't even read my own notes. More roles in the EOC and ECC for Māori. At the moment, we've sort of semi-mandated to have one, a liaison kind of role that sits next to the controller. And the feedback I've received to date is maybe we need more at the logistics and ops end. And we had a great storytelling around logistics support from, let's say, Gabrielle's environment, where support was coming from outside the region to Marae inside the region, and emergency management was sort of, controlling it and then maybe blocking its energy. So just how do we everyone win in that situation? I don't have a solution at the moment. Community connections, there's a bit of stuff happening, quite a bit of stuff happening from Shane and his team in this space. But the key thing here is the rebalancing of the emergency management team and your teams. We've got caught up around a capacity challenge. We've brought in additional resourcing, which we're funding from an underspend from the group so far. We will be later than planned, but that's an arbitrary date anyway. But it does have a flow-on effect, and the dates are listed there. Infrastructure and assets, the two things I'm going to focus on by June meeting is the EOC and the Common Operating Platform. The Common Operating Platform, there are at least 2, maybe 3 or 4 things that we could buy that will make us better. This is a procurement process, and we'll go through a procurement process with HPRC guidance and see where we get to. EOC-wise, there is no sugarcoating this. If you want a best practice EOC, arguably Hastings, if they retake the ECC, are the only team that has one. Now, if you all have EOCs, but it depends to what standard we need them to be at, and that's a discussion we need to have. There is discussion there about the ECC moving. That discussion is live. I think the discussion is inevitable and was always going to be inevitable. The EC move to a better facility is not a fit for purpose ECC. The timing is the discussion topic. That's my belief. The actual act is not. That's common sense. That's from my perspective. Training and exercising, we're making real strides in that space. Between the BAU work that Shane's team is doing anyway and has been doing for the last 18 months and the additional funding we've received, we have trained thousands of people over the last 18 months in basic emergency management, and then the additional funding is training hundreds in advanced emergency management. That process has just started, however, so we're only at the start of that. The exercise plan, we will send out dates for the exercises by council, but broadly speaking, each council will do a tabletop activity if our plan works in July, and then each council will do an EOC exercise in either August or September, with the regional exercise in late November, post local government elections. Performance and assurance, that's yet to start because that's based in part on recruitment. Planning is or later in financial year 25-26, where we need to upgrade the plan, and service level agreements will be in draft form if it all works by the end of the next week. Questions?
Thank you, Matt. That is so useful, the dashboard, actually, and some real successes there. So well done on your mahi, the team's mahi, Keg, Shane, well done to you all. Questions? Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Matt. I'm really interested in the 1 July handover. Got 3 key things that need to be done. And are there any realistic roadblocks that are going to stop it happening? And I'm simply looking at it, let's not let perfection get in the way of progress. And does it require all of the councils to have attained a goal or just some of them?
The current model is not broken, despite the fact that we've had reports telling us we need to do better. It's not broken. So I would be recommending we shift when we are ready to shift, especially given I've given you an arbitrary date. I don't even know what day that is. You know, it's not aligned to the moon, the weather, the seasons. It's not aligned to anything. So I've given an arbitrary date because otherwise we will never move. We will keep on staring at ourselves, looking for awesome. As it relates to roadblocks, our recruitment would be a big one. I would be really keen to make sure that we have a group controller, an acting group controller, local controllers, and your emergency management team physically in place. I did have a desire to have them in place, taking control of their team, their council, their territorial authority. That is the impact of us not progressing the rebalancing in time. I think that's a judgment call, personally. In Wairoa's case and in Central Hawke's Bay's case, it is subject to consultation and in this public forum, but I would say that they are, and in Napier's case, you've got teams already. Napier and Hastings, you've got teams already. We're increasing them. So I think it's a judgment call. Yeah, I think the discussion around perfection, I think that's a joint committee discussion. I think Shane, in his acting role, will give you a technical and leadership role. He's both our leader and our technical lead. He'll give you his opinion, and you'd be wise to listen to it. But you're in charge of the system, not Shane. So I think there's your dilemma there. I can't see why we can't go on 1 July, but that's me being half full.
Thank you, if I may. Just a comment from me. So I don't normally attend these, so I'm just looking at it from the outside with a community view. They just want to see us making progress. And so it would be disappointing to have a delay if we can move forward and then tell them that we're on to the next phase. So just looking at that, keep the pressure on. I like your glass half full thinking. Let's keep going. Let's keep hitting our deadlines.
Thanks, Councillor Kerr. Mayor Walker.
I'm really pleased you asked about that, Councillor Kerr, actually, because the 1 July thing, there has to be something community tangible as well, but because otherwise it's meaningless. If we're going to be community-led, there has to be something in there that they can touch and feel that's different, and I don't know exactly what that is, but the teams who are dealing with resilience plans and hubs and stuff maybe have got something that could signal that. I just wanted to talk about the service level agreements and the process between now and 1 July to get to that space. And you've got the scope of kind of the conversations that you're having in here. The one thing that my local team would tell me that is keeping them awake at night is whether there is an increase in maturity on the river warnings and monitoring equipment that gives them better guidance of when they're going to have to act. Is that kind of combination of service level between regional council and TAs part of that trade-off in the service level agreements?
If I can answer it broadly, and then I might defer to Nick as the CEO, Shane as the General Manager. Without a doubt, throughout this process, the discussion around minimum standards has arisen around each council will need to make a decision around, and we're seeing this happening. In one council's case, they want to be at the gold standard tomorrow. In other councils, they want to take 2 years to get there. And, some councils have a gift of rating bases that enable them to make that call. Others don't have that gift. This minimum standard thing is something that I'm going to provide in the service level agreement that suggests what what you should be at by 1 December of this year, 1 December of next year, 1 December of the following year. As it relates to warning systems, I'm not getting into the detail of the warning system unless directed. We have a warning system in place, it has been improved and increased. In terms of the standard of that warning system, that is part of this asset review process. It's in there, but it's from July onwards. I haven't addressed that at this stage. So I think I've sort of half answered your question.
If I can get Nick just to update us on the monitoring part and then maybe the warning.
Yep. So in terms of critical monitoring systems, there's a significant investment, several millions of dollars now, well underway. So it's got the critical focus is making the monitoring systems more resilient. So that's looking at having 4 types of ways of our river gauges communicating back with us, everything from satellite to digital to analog and so on. So that is all underway. The second part of that process is then understanding how we make some of that information available more publicly. So at the moment you can track river levels and rainfall on our website. That will soon become a thing called a severe weather hub and includes 29 new website cameras around the region so people can look at that information for themselves. So I'm really confident that the investment in telemetry and so on is there. Ultimately, every flood is monitored and the conversation goes on currently with the group office around what the implications of that might be and locally with group controllers, and that will continue. As local EOCs become I guess, more strengthened in their ability to respond, then we'll need to ensure there's a direct link between our flood monitoring folks and those local EOCs. And again, how you activate depends on whether it's a flood purely in Wairoa or a flood across potentially across the whole region. One of the challenges we have as a region is that the majority of our rivers are really short run. So if we are going to get to the point where people evacuate, you have to almost evacuate them before the rain has started. And that will be a decision that ultimately comes to local controllers working with their local mayors and the emergency services, or potentially where it's region-wide with the group. So I think to sum it up, lots of investment in the resilience of the system, lots of work going on around making sure those communication protocols are in place, and lots of work going on around making what is there more public facing so people can make decisions for themselves if they want to early in the process.
Chair, can I that's the clearest explanation of the challenges of our river monitoring that I've heard in 8.5 years of sitting at this table. So thank you for that. Because that idea of short run rivers meaning we've got to evacuate almost before it rains, that is very, very helpful information. I just open question for the table. Could the severe weather hub that you just talked about go live on 1 July?
I will hope it will be live well before 1 July.
It's ready before then.
But it will be a process of continuously improving that. Where we've got to, for example, Mayor Craig, if I just indulge me in one example, with Mayor Craig in Wairoa, we're trying to look for things that are not necessarily always just mathematical triggers about whether you will flood or not, but things that will make a difference to communities because they understand those places. There's a set of swings on the lower part of the river in a playground in Wairoa, and we use that there now as a thing to be able to say to the community, if the water's going to get to that set of swings, then you need to have made some decisions about whether you want to be in your house or not. So it's those kind of things alongside this thing is flowing at 2,500 cumecs that we're trying to look for. That intel will come as much from your local communities, fed back through your local response plans and your resilience hubs, as it will come from us, because those are local pieces of information that people know. Excuse my language. Holy heck, when the water gets to this level, we know from experience that causes us problems.
Just a note that we will get together as a joint committee online just to inform you about the Weather Hub before it's launched. Yeah.
happy to send you a testing version.
Thank you.
Penny, Madam Chair,
Yes.
just a real point of clarification. At the moment, like you say, I can go online and see what the river flow is or what the rainfall is. The piece that's missing is, what does that mean to me where I live?
Yep.
So I really like the concept of I can look at an image and if the swing is underwater, I need to get out now. So just acknowledge that's brilliant. Really looking forward to seeing you rolling it out, because that piece, what does it mean for me, is the critical element. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it'll take a little bit more computing power. So this is step one. We want to get to the point as well where you can see a forecast and what your river might get to. So yeah, again, a little bit more computing power. Where the regional council won't go is you should evacuate. That needs to be a decision that's taken locally through your EOCs and yourselves signing off mandatory evacuation orders. And we are working with the group office and Shane's team to work out how do we best use the text warning systems that exist for people, and do we need some text warning systems of our own, but ones that are not reliant on us trying to keep lists of people's phone numbers, because they are hopeless. So yeah, lots in that space. But Deputy Mayor, as you said, that's the ideal where we need to get to.
It empowers me as a community member to look at the Berry Road Bridge and go, wow, I can't see the red mark. Time to evacuate.
Yep.
Lovely, thank you.
I think we'll leave it there and just carry on, but some great discussion. Thank you. Matt, if there are no other questions for Matt?
No, good to hear about the training for Māori and community. I think that's awesome. And, and having our own nuanced representation at this table and others. Ka pai.
Another question, if I may. Regarding exercises, one of the things that came out in one of the reports is that exercises in the past haven't necessarily been worst case scenario with an overlay of a something else. So, and a something else. So with the exercises that are going to be happening in the next, well, I guess, years and years, will we be doing that? Setting up a scenario and then throwing in, hang on, there's a power.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm an alternate controller in Hutt City. I was a portfolio lead for that, and we weren't exercising at the time, and we changed our emergency management system. The first exercise we held, we achieved turning on the system and giving our controllers update brief. We didn't do any scenario. We just logged on. The second exercise, we did a scenario, and it was to do with the river, and it tended to flood around a particular area, and of course it flooded where people have inequity challenges and so on. The third exercise, we did 2 shifts, multiple scenario, and so on. I think you need to be prepared that 2025 is going to make you're going to have to look at the cup's half full scenario and accept the fact that we've trained a couple of thousand people, we've got them in a room, we've turned them on, turned the system on, and we've established a baseline. I think you need to be prepared for the fact that you might do nothing more in those exercises and have a professional working group for a day. 2026 and 2027, we need to be a lot more ambitious, because investment would have occurred at that point, training would start to come to fruition. Now, if, Hastings, you've just done an exercise, I'll actually be looking for a B+ answer from Hastings, because you've already turned on and you've done that process, and Regan assures me that you guys are at that space. Great. Wairau tends to do a whole lot of live rehearsals. They tend to, you tend to get flooded a couple of times a year. So I guess what I'm saying is we're going to be at different stages. There will be multiple scenarios. Your emergency management advisors are going to let you know where we should be. And I think we need to accept there's an equaliser graph here. I think maybe there's a couple of challenges here. Staff turning up. This is not a nice to have. I would contend this should be in people's JDs. But if you're in Wairau or Central Hawke's Bay, you can't get enough staff. You need 150 for your EOC, and you've only got probably 100 in your staff full time. You need half of them for business continuity. So we're going to need to rely on our volunteers and Māori across the region to staff the response. I think the second thing is we need to give energy and stand next to the emergency management training and exercises. Already, we're finding it hard for people to find time to go to training because it's too much for short notice, or I don't have enough time to attend. Well, what about when we say we want you to attend for this training activity and this training activity and the regional activity? There's 3 days of training this year for everyone involved in emergency management. 3 days, not 3 hours, not just turn up and sort of participate, 3 whole days and rehearsal prior. So that will require, and you've got BAU and you've got priorities across the board. I get it. I'm just pointing out that we've got investment that we're signing up for, but it needs to be operationalised. I think this year we need to be kind to ourselves and establish the baseline and be clear about where we're good and where we've got work on. 26 and 27, 2026 and 2027, I think is when we get a bit more ambitious and set some targets.
Thank you, Matt. Well done.
One more question from me.
We are moving on.
This actually, if I ask the question, you can tell me whether it's appropriate or not.
Lovely.
So I'm sitting here representing the regional ratepayers, not the Hastings ratepayers, and I read that HDC have advised about the Sedum Group needing to relocate.
Yes.
So my question is, what work has been done with that? Is there a task force that's been set up to access that, or is it? Yeah, it's.
I'll just get Nick to comment quickly.
Yeah,
Nick.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Short answer is yes, we are just in the process of putting a little wee working group together.
Lovely.
The discussions I've had with Nigel are that date is a stake in the sand. The critical principle we're trying to do here is to make sure that any transition occurs with all of us still able to respond, because we need as a group, as the administrating authority for the group office, to make sure we can support Hastings and everybody else in an emergency. So we're just working through some options. I think it'll be a transition over a period of years in terms of where we go first as a group and where we finally end up. But Shane's doing a grand job of starting to pull that together.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, kia ora. Thank you, Matt and Deputy Mayor Kerr. Would you like to move the item?
More than happy to.
And Mayor Alex, happy to second. All those agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you, Matt. Okay, we move on to our updates. And Shane, can we take this as read? And if you could just highlight some key successes or risks, and then we'll take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, an apology, page 23, under it says Community Resilient Plans, it mentions 7 hubs, and it should have been 27.
26.
But you'll notice in the actual summary and in the more verbose part, it does say 27, so 27 was correct. I think the thing I want to sort of focus on first is around training. It's already been mentioned. We've actually had a significant capability increase, predominantly around coordination centres for now, but also now moving into more of the welfare and needs assessment. We've had actually exceptional feedback on the program to date. The risk I would raise is it's a short risk. It's the challenge, it's the tempo at which we're expecting people to complete this training. To give you an indication, if someone wants to be a function manager, a 2IC or a response manager, so someone at a seniorish level, who is going to provide the coaching, the mentoring and a response, effectively we're asking them to do 7 days of training before the end of June. So that's a big ask, as Matt already indicated, given the other work. And also there are prerequisites, so it's about a sequencing challenge in there as well. But having said that, no one's disputing or having an issue with the program. It's just the time at which the training becomes available versus the time they need to complete it due to the funding and the work is a short run. But to put in perspective, even if I take the working in a coordination centre, so that and the prerequisites is effectively what you may have heard of before of SIMS 4, in 4 weeks trained 177 people. That's more than we did in entire years prior.
Yes.
So when we kind of look at that and go, actually, we've done a lot and we continue to do a lot. In fact, the scale now that we're operating at is where we now need to have commercial event booking systems just to manage it because it is so massive and probably at a scale that no one else in the country is doing currently. And so that's actually creating a real visible difference to the level of capability and increase of capacity. In the report, it talks about 65 people are in function courses. That's an ever-growing number. I checked this morning, it's now 118, because the courses have only just become available. And this is the first time they've ever been run in this region, and in fact, for many regions, they've never been run yet. So a significant amount happening in there. That will also be then, over time, be managed with regular engagements, communities of practice, etc. So it's not just a one and done deal. That also includes an increase in capacity. So we've found that people are now feeling more confident and engaged. So where post-Gabrielle, I can only talk in detail around the Emergency Coordination Centre, the ECC had down to dozens of people who still wanted to be engaged. Now we have more than 100 people that have now engaged in training to lift that. Matt's already spoken about exercising, so I won't talk about that. And we continue to work with communities. A couple of things just working. We had a really good presentation in NAPE the other day, and thank you, Mayor Wise, for opening that around the tsunami risk and the agent-based modelling. Good feedback at 160 people from the community. We're doing a whole lot of work that Nick referred to around trigger levels and work with emergency services about actually how do we set trigger levels. And we'll be piloting a couple of these areas, and that will be front-footing with communities. So we'll be having a conversation with communities first about what does trigger levels look like. And those trigger levels go right into the detail of, when I'm thinking about them, what does it look like we need to evacuate people? And so working back from that. Finance-wise, it talks in there, there's a bit of an underspend. In actual fact, we're overspent in some of our external expenditure. That reflects the training Matt talked about, sort of $260,000 in additional spending of transformation. Because we do have some FT shortages, that obviously has offset that. That money will then end up back in the reserves, which will only help for next financial year with more transformation work. We're expecting all those staff challenges to be sorted by July. And that's probably it for now. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Shane, and we're definitely noticing the uplift of game, really, and capability to increase capacity, which is fantastic to see. I note the financials are quite basic this meeting, but will be more detailed next meeting, please. And if anyone wants after this meeting detail from these financials, you're happy to share them with the committee. Thank you. Fantastic. Are there any questions for Shane?
More a suggestion?
Yes, Deputy Chair.
As a councillor who's done the 2-day Sims training, I would actually recommend that all of our governors do it. And I appreciate there's a priority of who should be trained, but at some point in the future, I think it would become great best practice at the beginning of each triennium. We all got Sims training.
For the Chair, in fact, what we have done is for both Central Hawke's Bay and for Napier recently, some training for elected representatives, and probably highlights the fact that we can do more in that space, and also with the exercising workshopping. So whether it's the Sims training or other training, but I agree that there needs to be training around the role of governance and how it works in response and into recovery.
May I just comment again? Can we also include the Hastings District Rural Community Board? Because they, like our councillors, our rural councillors, were at the coalface in Gabrielle. So Sims training and inclusion in conversations would be most useful.
Okay. Is it best that each district council start to accumulate the community and collectives so that it runs through the councils? Is that just an easier way to coordinate?
I'm not sure what the best
We'll
answer
just think
is.
about how we do that.
If you're happy, we can connect afterwards and work through what that might look like.
Yeah,
Thank you. Through the Chair, just with regards to the work programme, Shane, what is your anticipated timing around that being established in?
A new work program?
Yeah.
The idea would be have it done before the next KEG meeting, which means it'll be then to your next joint committee meeting, which should hopefully line up with then the transformation work. Over time, we want to see that those transformations just BAU. And eventually, and so the dashboards, when Matt has the new dashboards, then that should also incorporate the entire work program, and so you can see it in totality.
Great, thank you.
Fantastic. If there are no other questions, can I please have a mover and a seconder for the paper? Mayor Kirsten and Mayor Craig. Thank you. All those who agree say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Right, okay, one more update. That's you again,
It is.
Shane.
Yes.
Controller appointments.
All right, thank you. Look, I'm sure we all want this to be further advanced than it was, myself included, because it obviously has a significant impact on me as well. The big challenge that we've had with the controller selection is we went out for expressions of interest, of which we had 4 expressions of interest come to me, of which 3 I was already in conversations with anyway, so 1 additional. I already had a couple of others that I was working with. There are complexities with some of those. Some of them are not in the region. Some of them are about to leave the region. Some of them have some, I would say, conflicts of interest given some of the critical roles they play within the region already in response. But I'm working through all of those with them. And I can confirm in my paper where I mentioned I'm going to try and get some spots on the next controllers course. I have now got 3 places reserved on the course, so no matter who those people are that we end up selecting, there is a place for them. The fortunate thing is the training happens infrequently, 2 or 3 sessions a year. So the next one is August, and there are 7 weeks of pre-course work that will need to start before then. So whilst the face-to-face course is in August, they're going to start 7 weeks prior to that, which isn't that far away, that they'll start their training. And they also need to do some of the other internal courses that we're delivering as a prerequisite for that. So again, there is a sequencing. But I am working with those individuals to get them through the process so that we can get them on those courses so that hopefully as soon as they've completed that August course, whether in this committee or because it's publicly excluded, potentially after talking to governments, whether we can do it outside of committee, we can appoint those people. In the interim, of course, that still leaves us a challenge, which has been hard to resolve despite attempts. I'll continue to do that. I think what I would say is we will rely on the national system to surge staffing for controllers to respond, and I'm confident we will get that, but there is obviously a gap there between when we call and when they arrive. And the other option is still local controller delegations when required, given that we have 15 local controllers who can work anywhere, but you effectively have very limited group controllers. So it's about being pragmatic in the short term.
Okay, thank you, Shane, for that update. Are there any questions? There are none. Fantastic. A mover, Mayor Craig, and Deputy Mayor Tanya. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Kia ora. Okay, team, we move into public excluded item, which is a Cyclone Gabrielle coroner's inquest legal representation is...
Got to remove the public.
Yes, yep.
Yep, and we can stop broadcasting.
Yep, I'm just going to take any note as to a reason why we don't move into public excluded. This is just your chance to voice that before we do move in. So Mayor Craig and Deputy Mayor Tanya Kerr, all those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Aye.